compliance with the same rules that we impose on the homeowners in our districts.
We are self-insured, and we do everything we can to minimize the risk to the city.
Okay, so they're in the same, so just like we self-insure, that this is part of that. All the properties? Is that, okay, even the ones that we share with the feds or other entities? Do we split the costs, or?
The cost, Vice Mayor, relative to some property like that, I think there's going to be premiums that each department is going to have to pay relative to risk management charges. And those risk management charges would be shared with the various funding sources that are relevant for those properties.
So is there a way, sort of wrap, I guess, this part of the show up, to find out how much it costs to manage, insure, pick the weeds, whatever it is we have to do for each of the properties that we think are sellable, so that we could understand, because we might want to take lower prices just to get the things off the books, get them out in the private sector, as Sal has said, Bill has said, city manager has alluded to here. You know, there's sort of a cost benefit to that. We might take a lower price. You know, sometimes if you see someone selling a house, they'll put motivated seller on the thing on the website or something. We might be a motivated seller just to not have these expenses, since we're not really expecting to get a king's ransom for the actual properties themselves because of where they're placed and so forth. Does such a thing exist? Is there a way to do that? Or is that some labor?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor, short answer is no, that does not exist. I think we'd have to go through some analysis in order to.
Yeah, and I think I want them to stick on getting the list together of
No, I would rather,
properties
yes, I
first.
would.
When they're done with that, then they can do, yeah, no, I
But I
think
do think it's a legitimate question. I mean,
It
we're spending
is.
money, it's part of the budget, we just voted on
I think,
yesterday.
for example,
We don't really know how much it costs.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, they don't either.
we're probably better to able to identify it on a more property specific. So I know, for example, we know what we were spending in the police department budget to secure and clean 2222 West Greenway. It was in the tens of thousands of dollars a year for security and for maintenance. So it's both the $1.8 million gross price plus removal from the police department budget of $25,000 a year of these other things. And we can identify those as we go property by property.
Great.
Just to finish up with Camelback, it's a remnant, and we do have, it's only been marketed for a couple of weeks, but we do have an offer on it. So we're getting some interest.
Great.
So, great. Jesse Owens Parkway, it's up there because it's a fairly, it's 9.5 acres. It's a good size. It's in a tough area. We are, though, getting some interest primarily from low-income housing developers, so, and it would be a good area for that.
But it's got a great name.
It does.
A very historic figure.
It does.
All right, with that, we're going to turn it over to Scott Sumner.
Can I ask a question to
Yes.
something we were discussing earlier? So these 5 properties, I think you gave us sort of the prices we're talking about at each one, or at least maybe the first couple. Those 5, what would be the total we could expect to net from these 5 sales?
Is it, just clarification, is it 6 or 5?
We got 5 on the screen.
This is
We missed,
next
it
one.
does seem like we're missing one.
Yeah, this is the, sorry, that's what we were about to go through?
Right.
Oh, the previous. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I was saying
Yeah.
5 because, all right, the 6 that you just talked about.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize they were different.
Steve, do you have any idea what that might
Well-
yield? Net?
Sorry. Yeah, they all don't have appraisals, so the remnants, are really going to be de minimis. 12th Street and Greenway is a fairly, it's again almost 7 acres. We put our pricing between $1.5 million and 2.4. So again, on the low end, if you sold it for $1.5 million, you're going to net $1.4 million, something like that, $1.35 million.
So if I said for the 6, might be 5 million total. I mean, when it's all said and done, maybe not.
No, the only other one of significant value other than 2222 West Greenway that we talked about is the Jesse Owens site, and that market is not as strong, and that's really, I would guess, somewhere in the $500,000 range. So you're maybe talking closer to the 4 million.
So 4 million, and this gets back to what I discussed earlier. I hope Councilman Valenzuela on the phone, and I appreciate I probably shouldn't have just picked Palo Verde, but since we discussed it, it's nothing against Palo Verde, it's nothing against that neighborhood and so forth. But we're in a budget crunch. Councilman Gates talked about that yesterday. So these were the, I guess, 6 most attractive properties we had, most sellable, quickest to get on the market. That's why they're the first ones we're talking about. And we're talking about $4 million. A little quick math. If the golf course at Palo Verde is 100 acres,
No,
I think it's
yeah,
about 40 or 20.
maybe,
whole
yeah.
golf course, I mean,
Yeah,
9 acres?
yeah,
All right,
yeah, it's 9-hole.
okay, I'll recalibrate my math. But if it had been 100 acres minus their fee, if you could get, which I was told would probably be reasonable, $200,000 an acre, that's $20 million. Now you're saying it's 40% of that, so help me out. You'd be talking more like $8 million or $9 million. So one sale like that is more than all of these most attractive properties combined by double. It would really wipe away the need for the water fee increase that was just voted on by, I guess, everybody except us yesterday and Sal. $1.50, on each water bill. It's just, it's a lot of money. It's a bigger property. It's a more attractive property. So again, to just write it off and say we're never going to discuss this, I don't think, because we're not going to get where we need to go with this piecemeal approach. It doesn't sound like, or where we want to go anyway. So just trying to offer alternatives.
Well, and I guess I would follow up on that. I mean, obviously you have to go through, we hearing about all that, got to go through and get all the records straight. But I mean, are there other significant properties that you're going to bring forward to us that are of this size, or are these going to be the most valuable properties that we're going to see? I mean, we need to know that as a council.
Yeah, I guess that's also,
Yeah.
but I was sort of
Yeah.
reading the tea leaves here, and perhaps
Yeah.
overly negatively, but
I think one of the things about these properties is they were as you identified, they were sort of the low-hanging fruit because they were properties that we had that were not in anybody's plans to do anything with in any time recently. Jesse Owens has been sitting there for a long time. There's no city department that has plans for that. I think the next group of properties will be, so for example, the Parks Department and the Library Department have strategically purchased land far in advance of development in order to get it at very low prices for what they know is inevitable development to come, and they're ready, and so they're not paying high prices when the land is in the middle of subdivision development. So there's a whole group of properties that are owned by parks and libraries where there'll be a policy decision for the council of, is the money today worth more to us than the service that might be needed to be provided in 5 or 7 or 10 or 15 years? And then when you get to that point in 15 years, would you, 1, have the land available to buy, and 2, would it be at a price you could afford to buy? So that'll be some, I think the next group will have some policy decisions related to future planning versus current need, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Councilman Valenzuela.
I appreciate it. I just want to mention one more quick thing about Palo Verde and this overall process, this very subcommittee and everything else we've been, going through as far as finding efficiencies. I think we as a council have been doing a great job. I think we as a subcommittee has been doing a great job. Councilman Gates, you've been the chair of this subcommittee for quite some time now. I think you obviously have spearheaded many of these efforts. I just wanted to remind the public of my viewpoint. If nothing else, it's about efficiencies. It's about cost savings. But there's a balance there that we have to remember. It's also about quality of life. And to give up a golf course, like Palo Verde, it wasn't too long when that very subcommittee room that you were in was packed with people from the Palo Verde area, and not just in District 5, but obviously District 3 and 6 and everywhere else. As you know, the Palo Verde Golf Course is new to District 5 after redistricting. It was in District 3. It is a very, very important golf course, and again, just green space to the neighborhoods and to the city of Phoenix. So there's a balance, and I hear our city manager, Mr. Zerker, describe these parcels as low-hanging fruit, and I appreciate that. So let's start looking at other options as well. This was a low-hanging fruit, and let's start looking at other options. I don't, I'm a little uncomfortable, and I'll even use that word, in thinking that Palo Verde, that this golf course is considered low-hanging fruit. This is incredibly important. There's a balance between, and we are in a budget crisis. That whole food tax vote from a few months ago, probably, hindsight being 2020, I don't know if we the council would have done that either. But now that we're here at this point, I want to be careful before we start, moving towards this actual option of just giving up one of our courses. I think we have to look at everything, look at all of the parcels, and I, for one, if it were up to me, I would absolutely take our courses off the table, because they represent more than just golf. But again, just going back to the first point that I wanted to make is it's not just cost. It's like everyone's personal household budget. It's about cost savings, but it's also about quality of life. And I think this golf course represents an important quality of life to the people of Phoenix, and in particular, the neighborhoods around it. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman, it's Jim. First of all, sorry to drag your district in this. I can assure you I'm a lonely warrior in this. Everybody else is grimacing and looking at me. The only guy who's happy is the real estate guy who's thinking about the commission he could get if he could actually get that and sell it. So no, I don't think Ed or anybody else said it was low-hanging fruit. Even I didn't say that. I was just trying to put options on the table. And I will tell you, I guess all of you guys, I'm just a little concerned that I think we built this up a little more than maybe it could possibly be, given what we've heard here, how we're going to find other properties that might be even close to as valuable even as the two that we've got. We might find some, but it sounds like it's going to be a slog. I was putting a more lucrative option on the table that I have no expectation will necessarily pass, but I just think it's something that should be considered. But I don't think anybody was saying it was low-hanging fruit, including me. But part of the reason I steered the conversation to the costs of keeping these properties is that may actually be real savings. We don't know how much. Is it a few $100,000 a year or a few million? I guess we don't really know based on the way the conversation is. It sounds like the records don't exist to give it to us in that quick a fashion. But I think Councilman Gates is right. They need to go through the list, identify other low-hanging fruit, get it to market as soon as possible to lower our insurance and clean up and other costs. I guess I was just trying to throw out something that we've got other stuff that might be more valuable, because some of this stuff doesn't sound like it's particularly valuable.
And I guess thank you for that comment, and I do agree with that. And obviously,
I mean, he can't see our
think
faces,
Councilman-
so he
yeah.
may be worried that I'm
Councilman-
winning the debate. I'm
Councilman-
not
yeah,
under any
Council-
illusion that I am.
And
so.
no offense to you, Vice Mayor, but I think Councilman Valenzuela hopefully knows that I am of a similar mind with him on this issue with regard to the importance of municipal golf. But I think what we need to, and I appreciate how Ed, you position this. This is these are unprecedented times in the city of Phoenix, and we've just imposed a contract on one of our employee units. It's never happened before, and we can debate, that issue. But the reality is we had to do that. So we need to lay all these things out on the table. Do we want to have to impose additional contracts that have some kind of cuts to our employee units? Do we want to have additional taxes? Do we want to maybe take some properties out there that we bought a few years ago for the library or whatever the case may be and say, you know what, we'd love to have that, but we got to make tough choices. So we might have to sell
We're struggling
some
to
of
pay
that.
for the libraries we've got right now.
Yeah, so I think, I guess I wouldn't say that I have no hope that we're not going to be able to generate any revenue. It's just these ones were easier. And even the one on Greenway, 2222, I went out in that neighborhood and made sure that everyone was okay with that, because everybody thought we were going to have a police precinct there. So even that low-hanging fruit
Had some challenges.
Yeah, had some challenges. So none of this is easy. It's just a reality that we're going to have to make tough choices. This is one of the options. And again, so having said all that, the message I wanted to send out of this is what revenues or what resources do you need to keep moving this process forward? Because I do want us to have that list
How
as
quickly
soon as
can it move?
Exactly. I want a time. That's what I want to come out of this with, is a timeline of when we should expect it, so that can get in the hands of you all so that you can start marketing those properties?
Mr. Chairman, we expect the GIS testing to start in July. We should have GIS reports completed in September. In order to have GIS testing, we need to complete our scrubbing. So our scrubbing should be complete sometime in July, so it's around that time, I think, that we would have paper reports to take a look at.
So we
So
can
the-
commit to come back into your September meeting with, at a minimum, a status update, but hopefully that review done.
Okay, so when do we, sorry, but when do we actually think we'll have another list like this in front of us where we will have the opportunity to have a more detailed discussion on whether we should put additional properties on the market? And I'm not gonna hold you to the exact week or whatever, but to give us an idea, because we're looking at how this is gonna impact future budgets.
Mr. Chairman, I believe in September we'll have a complete list that we'll be able to take a look at.
Okay, that this subcommittee will be
Yes,
able to take a
yes.
look at. Okay, great. Councilman Noakowski.
You know, I like to see is the different processes of selling property, because I know that there's different departments and there's different processes, even with trading city property with individuals that want, if we see some properties that we can upgrade or that would be strategically better for the city of Phoenix to trade them. I had a situation where in the area of Laveen and Estrella, the city of Phoenix required the developers to actually build neighborhood parks. Prior to that, the city, exactly what the city manager was saying, forecast a community out there. We purchased property. Now we have a neighborhood park ran by the HOA and the neighborhood, and then we have a city park that's ran by the city of Phoenix that happens to be 14 acres of vacant land. There's not a need for a park, so now we're trying to figure out a way to sell that property, but now there's a new process that the parks just passed because of the, I guess with the whole situation with the Little Canyon Park and the trade that we had there. Now there's a whole 12-step process. So I'd like to be more informed about that because we had individuals that were out there wanting to purchase some of that vacant area. We have, I think it was like 100 or so parks that aren't being used right now that are out there from 14 acres to 40 acres of land. And so I'd like to learn about the process before we go out there and we start to try to market it. Let's figure out if there's a way to, what the process is, because those 12 steps almost made it impossible for those developers to come in and actually purchase that property.
Other comments or questions from my colleagues? Otherwise, we'll move on to the RFPs for strategic city properties.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, subcommittee members. In addition to the properties that have been discussed today, Community and Economic Development is also proceeding with requests for proposals for disposition of property, for selling property for development instead of, in addition to getting proceeds. The 5 projects we talked about last time are listed here on the slide, and I just thought we'd take a few minutes to review the status on each one of those. Probably the most significant progress that's happened is on Central Station. When we were before this subcommittee before in March, we had just received the proposals, and since that time, we have an evaluation panel that recommended moving forward with one of the proposals. We have a recommendation that's been approved by directors in the city, and we have started negotiations as of early this week with that developer. So the recommendation was for Smith Partners. Bill Smith is the lead of that team, and he's an experienced developer out of Chicago that from 2002 through the present has built and opened 9 residential towers in Chicago. In 2013, he opened a 4-story residential property at 36 and Campbell here in Phoenix. And in 2014, he started construction at another project that's about a 4-story residential project up at 16th and Georgia. So I think the committee of the panel was really looking for somebody who had a proven track record, and this team really showed that. So what he's proposing for the Central Station site is highlighted with a little yellow arrow on the left of the slide, or on the right side of the slide here. So this is Central Station, bounded by Van Buren on the south side or the right side of the slide, and then by Central and First Avenue. So what you see here is a residential tower about 390 feet tall, 34 stories, 476 residential units, apartments, a parking garage adjacent with some transit space and some co-working space or commercial office space, a dog park adjacent, and a total construction cost and project cost, excuse me, of $82 million. So it's a pretty significant change to the skyline downtown if it's able to happen. Really bookends Civic Space Park. We have the historic post office on the north side of the site, and this tower would be on the south side of that site. The second property on the list that we just wanted to provide an update on is the Barrister property. This is a city-owned building and about 1 acre of adjacent property, constructed in 1915 and on the historic register. We actually issued the RFP last month in April, and we have proposals due on July 7th. There are several uses that may be viable for the site. Just in our discussions with developers, they've raised the possibility of anything from residential to office to hotel to restaurants, a variety of uses. We have held 3 open houses as part of the RFP process, and we got great participation, happy to report. The first one, we had 40 people come, and the next 2, about 20 people apiece. So lots of interest. And then in terms of future RFPs, we are planning to move forward here with issuing RFPs for some housing property at Central and Columbus. We actually have authorization to issue that RFP at this point. We're waiting for private sector interest to materialize, where we're sure that there's actually going to be interest. Then we'll issue the RFP. And then there's 2 park and ride sites, one at 19th Avenue and Camelback, and then another up at Montebello, that are out there on the horizon that are very significant opportunities. And we're planning to issue the RFP so that development can happen immediately after the line's extended. And the site at Montebello specifically is no longer the end of the line and needed for a big park and ride. There's several other properties that we're looking at that are not as large or not as promising or a little further out on the horizon that I'm not going through here, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions for my colleagues? Yeah, no, great. Very exciting, that project there at Central Station. That's very, very exciting, and I think shows just the type of opportunities that we have available, in addition to just a straight sort of, just selling the land. So thank you for your work on that, Scott. We appreciate it. Anything further from my colleagues? All right, this is not posted for action, so we appreciate everybody's work on this and look forward to seeing you all in September. Thank you. Next, open data policy update. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. The City of Phoenix, much like many governments throughout the country, is working very diligently to increase transparency. We want our government to be open to all of the public. Today, we'd like to present to you our strategy and draft policy for open data and how the city might be able to move those initiatives forward. I allow Mr. Rob Sweeney to give you the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. This today is just for your information and discussion, and we'd be happy to receive any input that you might have. Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Ms. Cotton. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, like Ms. Cotton indicated, here to provide you an update on where we're at with the open data policy. We're going to talk about a couple of things today. Review based on what we discussed back in February, identify what our strategy was at that point in time, and then talk about the next steps to give you a timeline so you can see the progress we've made and then our strategy to get this implemented rather soon. So as a quick review, Mr. Chairman and members, you may recall the discussion in February where we talked about what the city is doing currently relative to transparency. We've done well. There are certain accolades that we've received from some nonprofits on what we've done, but an open data policy takes us to that next level relative to openness of government, transparency of our data, and the usability of that data in a way that the end user may wish to use that. So the benefits that we talked about back in February were numerous. We can talk about cost avoidance relative to having to create, let's say, web applications or data sets for people on the fly, where we could have it natively available for the community to use as they see fit. Other benefits include, yes, Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman. Yes.
just a thought on this. To the extent that this is more available, do we believe that this would lead to fewer public records requests then?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, absolutely. Part of the goal of the open data policy is really to have the concept of open by default. So meaning data that is non-sensitive and non-confidential, have it available for them so that way it's there for the consumption without asking for it and then having the city staff react to that. So we'd be looking at cost avoidance at that point.
And it's our public information office that handles these requests, right?
Right, many of them, yes, Mr. Chairman, come through our public information office and then goes to the data owner themselves. So it would be water department if they actually own the data, or the police department if they then need to collect that and then disperse that from an open data perspective. Absolutely. Additionally, we talked about examples in some of the other organizations, and that's what we're mirroring our policy after on some of the other larger jurisdictions, New York City, San Francisco, as well as some mid-size like Baltimore that have actually had success in an open data policy and a program within their jurisdictions. And our strategy moving forward was really to continue providing data and creating data sets to put out to the community for the consumption while we develop the ongoing strategy and policy that will set forth to tell staff and to the community that this is how we're going to go forth moving forward with our data. So some of our current strategies and what we're making available for the community, certain data sets continue to make them available. I believe in February you heard from the Transit Department relative to bus arrival information, and they're currently negotiating right now with the firm to put that data out for consumption, not only scheduled data but real-time data on the arrival. And our finance department continues the currency of the data as well as the quality of the data of our online checkbook on a monthly basis to ensure that the community can engage where their money is being spent, and they can actually see that on a month-to-month basis. In that time, we've also developed an open data policy. So we've reviewed the other cities' policies, as I mentioned, to use those best practices as well as industry best practices. So utilizing the Sunlight Foundation, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group that seeks to enhance openness of government and the transparency of government, their framework for an open data policy is what we're mirroring the City of Phoenix is after as well. So the elements that the staff is recommending be a part of this policy and which is currently under internal review is really that first stop point is very critical. Mandate open formats, meaning open by default. If we have the data, if it should be publicly available, make it so. And make it machine readable, make it and available in the format that that end user would like. We need to also make it available proactively. To your point, Mr. Chairman, don't wait for somebody to ask for it. Look and see what other data sets are out there. Poll the departments to find out what their most highly sought after data is, and let's be proactive about placing that out there. We want to make sure that we remove restrictions, so the policy needs to remove those restrictions to that data. But we want to do so in a very clean manner. We don't want to have a license for use for this, but we want to place the appropriate legal language in our online portal that will protect the city from that data's use as well as indemnify the city from that perspective. Very critical point, and Mr. Nowakowski, council member, you had indicated last time about certain sensitive data, and that is going to be paramount in this policy, that we ensure the public trust, that we don't place out any personally identifiable or perhaps confidential information or restricted. We're not necessarily wanting to promote where all of our water wells may be or where other things may be that are sensitive in nature after we did a classification after 9/11. So the policy will speak to the process by which departments and data owners will go through to ensure that the data they're placing out there doesn't meet the restrictions of sensitivity or confidentiality. We also want to make sure that we do not have an impact to our current online commerce that happens on phoenix.gov. The policy will speak to where the online portal shall live, because we want to make sure that as organizations and as community members want to, let's say, pay their water bill, sign up for a class for the Parks Department, they are not contending with other developers and the like that are constantly hitting our website trying to seek that data real time. So the concept is to move that elsewhere, still discoverable via phoenix.gov, but we want to make sure that we do not impact our current service delivery to the community. We want to make sure that we identify ongoing resources to not only create, but to migrate and then maintain the data sets. It's one thing to create it, but if the data is stale, it is of no value to the community or to the development community. And finally, we want to engage the community. In some circles, they call it a hackathon, but others are calling it challenge for innovation. So how can one leverage in the community, leverage our data to create something innovative, which could help spark economic development and spark greater interaction between the community and the city of Phoenix. So our next steps, Mr. Chairman and Subcommittee, is to finish our internal review of the draft policy in the coming month, and proactively now we're working with departments for them to proactively identify data sets that once the policy and the technical architecture is set, those data sets then would be able to move forward and be placed online. Our goal is, yes, sir?
Mr. Sweet, just a
Yes.
question. So obviously our partners in the media are the ones who oftentimes are making these requests. So are we reaching out to them, getting their input on, how to put together this policy in a way that will be, obviously respectful and helpful for them as they're trying to do their jobs, while, of course, balancing other interests?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, we will definitely do that. Our first goal is to look at the departments and what are their frequency of types of requests for data and making sure we hit those. We'll make sure that we ask them specifically, what is the media seeking, and we'll work through public information to outreach with the news media and find out what is important to them to have available. Again, to make sure it meets the testing of sensitivity and confidentiality at that point.
Because my thought is if they will engage in this and they appreciate that this data is available, then they will proactively decide not to submit these requests for information, public records requests anymore, which generates costs and expenses for the city that, if this is works out the way you're describing it, will be unnecessary, because they'll be able to just go and get the information. Sort of, so it's like how you get to go and fill up your Diet Coke by yourself. They can go and do that now and really save a lot of costs. I'm talking about cutting the PIO budget, Jim, so I thought you'd like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good point, Mr. Chairman. We'll make sure we reach out to the media.
Yep, I knew.
So our continuing on the next steps, our goal then is to get to council in the August-September timeframe for their consideration, full council consideration of the policy, and we can then formalize the next steps of identifying the funding, procuring the necessary services and location for that data, and then to enhance the use of that data sets by proactively engaging the community and creating events for some challenges, if you will, of the application development as well as economic development community to utilize that data for a greater purpose. And that will then be an ongoing component of our ongoing program for open data. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, we'd be glad to take any questions.
Questions, comments from my colleagues? Yeah, no, thanks for your work on this. This is great. All sorts of benefits coming out of this, and I appreciate you both taking the lead on this, and look forward to hearing more in the months ahead, the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Our final item, I guess, Ms. Cotton, you're not headed anywhere.
Gotta stay
Next
right
one
here.
is something that is near and dear to the District 3 office, and I'm guessing probably a lot of other city employees, a citywide email and calendar system update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. We're actually excited to be before you today to give you an overview of where we're headed with our update on our email and calendaring system. It's probably one of the applications that's used most frequently in the city, touches everyone. We hear lots of comments about it. We thought it would be take this opportunity to talk to you about it. And we also understand that there might be some questions regarding the listserv system that we use. We understand that's also something near and dear to many members of the council. So we're certainly happy to address those with you as well. And I will turn the presentation over to Mr. McGreeny, who will lead this effort.
Good morning, Chairman Gates and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having us here today. As requested during the November 20th meeting of this subcommittee, I'm very pleased to present an informational presentation updating the subcommittee on our plans for the consolidation and replacement of the city's email and calendaring system. First, let's review the current state of the city's email and calendaring systems. The city currently utilizes two different email systems. Microsoft Exchange is used by approximately 4,500 users in the city's police department, while IBM Lotus Notes is used for the rest of the city. These two email systems are incompatible with each other, and they lack any type of seamless integration. I've highlighted a few of the problems on the slide, but because we have two different email systems, the city lacks a definitive global address list. And I'm sorry to hit you with that little techno babble, but what it is essentially is a definitive list of all city email users in one database. So because we have two email systems, we are forced to create manual entries into each system for the users of the other system, which is extremely inefficient. And that's the only way we can facilitate transfer between the two email systems. Because we're running two different email systems, a connector, which is essentially the duct tape that holds the two systems together, is required to transfer email from one system to the other. The connector is no longer supported by the manufacturer. That puts us at risk because if the connector fails, we will bifurcate the system and there'll be two independent, unique systems that can't talk to each other.
If you're saying our system is bad, we already know.
I think it's universally despised, Vice Mayor. So additionally, any employee who tried to schedule a meeting is painfully aware of the incompatibility of the calendaring systems. They simply do not work. You can't see free time. It's very difficult to send a meeting. You're essentially sending them in the blind across the email systems. And that problem extends way beyond just internal calendaring. It's also external when we're trying to work with our business partners. It doesn't work there either. Both email systems require separate and redundant support structures, including staff, infrastructure, licensing, and maintenance agreements. And finally, the support for litigation, hold, and public records request is extremely limited in the Lotus Notes system. And that requires staff to fulfill these requests manually. The Information Technology Services Department, working with finance and other city departments, established a citywide standard for a new email system for the entire city. The standard is based on business, technical, and security requirements, the most challenging of which is the Criminal Justice Information System, known by the acronym CJIS. It's a federal standard mandated by the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it governs the access, the transfer, and the protection of criminal justice information. Any additional federal regulation is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA, which governs the access, transfer, and protection.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to go down memory lane here a little bit because I think it gives us some context. Did we not get to the point of an RFP on the email a few years ago?
Yes, we did.
So kind of help me understand why we're sitting here years later, and this process that you're discussing, while I appreciate it, we obviously were ready to go to a new system before we even got into all this. So I really appreciate this here so we can kind of air this out and figure out why. I mean, it's really inexcusable that we're on Lotus Notes. And again, to the Vice Mayor's point, we don't need to dredge that up, but just help me understand. And then, of course, on this one, like one of the earlier items, where I really want to get is, where's our timeline?
I disagree. We should have the airing of grievances right now. No, I'm kidding. I think it's fine.
So I don't mean to pick on you, but I really think that we, and for the benefit of our viewers and frankly new colleagues, why are we at this point after all of these years?
So we issued an RFP, perhaps it was 3 years ago, for an email system. The winner of the RFP was Google. And there's a problem with Google, and the fact is that Google Cloud Email does not comply with CJIS, and therefore the RFP was thrown out. If we...
Yes.
Can I ask a
Vice
question?
Mayor.
I am not a tech guy, but it does seem like tech guys would have been involved in the formulation of the RFP and would know, don't apply if you can't comply with X, or if you can't do X. So why wasn't that considered? Because it seems like that's kind of a major point. They can't do what we need them to do.
Chairman Gates, Vice Mayor Waring, I can't actually speak to the evaluation process. I wasn't part of that. However, again, it failed because of the lack of compliance of the winning vendor with the CGIS regulations.
So why wouldn't we go to the second, the group that finished number 2? I mean,
Again,
isn't that what we've done in the past with?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're going to ask Assistant CIO Rob Sweeney, who was an executive at that time, who can really answer these questions.
So it's Rob's fault. I like that.
Not at all.
Simple, easy to understand.
There you go, yeah. Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor, I'm here to fall on the sword. No, I'm just kidding. At the time, we were competitively procuring an email solution, and it was at the time where we wanted to make sure that we afforded all organizations and all firms an opportunity to bid. What we failed to recognize in working afterwards with the finance department is that they would rather not competitively procure intellectual property. And that's what we did, and that's why that failed, because we're now pitting one IP-based system, intellectual property-based system versus another. The firm can self-evaluate themselves that said, I can meet this requirement, and when we go through negotiations and start looking at what they actually can do, the answer was no, that they could not perform that.
But nobody could on the list? I mean, I assume we had more than one bidder.
There was more than one bidder. However, the structure of that RFP was an all or nothing. So we could not parse out certain elements of that RFP. So the way it was structured was flawed. So working with our finance department and our procurement officer.
Flawed in the way of fatal disease is flawed. I mean,
it was
bad.
If
and
we
it wasn't
allowed
gonna
it,
work, so.
yes, Vice Mayor, if we had structured the
It's not
RFP to be
flawed.
allowed to offer, to go to number 2 or to actually choose certain elements of the proposal, it was an all or nothing proposal at that
And so
point.
that set us back 3 years.
That set us back. So working with the finance department, they agreed that we could establish a standard, and they would then go competitively procure the standard which was set based on those business reasons, as Mr. McGreeny is speaking to now. So we went through the process to identify what is the appropriate standard for the city of Phoenix, truly vet whether certain companies could meet CGIS, HIPAA, and other requirements by talking to and working with industry-based firms as well as other governmental agencies to find out what should be the best standard for the city of Phoenix. That then would turn into a procurement level.
But this is a national standard that we're talking about.
But from a CGIS perspective, absolutely.
So there must be other cities who have email systems and similar. We're not the only city. We're certainly not the only city of our size. There's bigger, there's smaller, clearly. So, I mean, don't we know who can do it just by looking at who's doing it in other cities?
Yes.
I mean, I just
Mr.
don't
Chairman and
understand how
Vice
it's a
Mayor.
3-year process, I guess, to Councilman Gates' point. Sorry to step on your question again, but it's
So
just
to
kind
the
of
answer,
hard
to your
believe.
answer, Vice Mayor, the answer is yes. But what happened in between those 3 years is from a funding perspective, which would be necessary to replace the existing system, the funds were not there to do that. So based on the technology investment strategy we brought forth to this subcommittee a number of months back, and then put those dollars into the trial budget, which was then moving forward for formal adoption, those dollars are now set forth to actually replace the email system. So the work that's in front of you here didn't just happen yesterday. So during the time that the prior RFP was canceled until we were seeking the dollars to be placed in the budget over a couple of years, we've known that the standard needed to be, which Mr. McGreeny will get to, from a Microsoft perspective, the funding is now there to move forward to the next phase, which is actually procurement and deployment of that application.
All right, well, thank you. I felt like that was helpful, at least it was for me, to kind of be reminded of all this and kind of how we got to where we're at. And it's complicated, but it shouldn't have taken this long. There's a variety of reasons, I agree. I'm certainly not pinning it on anyone, but I appreciate that background. And unless you had further questions, we'll let you get back to CGIS here.
Okay.
Learning our new acronyms
Or we could
today.
spend more time on blame assessment. Which one of you guys? Just kidding.
Thank you, Chairman. In establishing the standard, we looked at departmental needs for integration of email and calendaring with citywide and departmental business applications. The integration with business applications drives efficiency. Rather than looking at it as just a separate email system and calendaring system, by integrating the two together, we can drive efficiency in our workforce and automation. We also, and I know it's near and dear to the heart of many of the members of this subcommittee, looked at the list server and those requirements. The listserv is used to send large bulk mailings to subscribers. It also is antiquated and is in need of replacement. It's very old. Staff performed extensive research in defining the new standard. We talked to Gartner. They're an independent research and advisory firm. We discussed what other jurisdictions were doing, both in the public sector as well as the private sector, and how they were deploying their email systems. And finally, we considered the existing city investments in office productivity and collaboration applications to ensure that our existing investments would be leveraged properly. The recommendation of the ITS department is to eliminate one email system and to consolidate all citywide users onto a Microsoft Exchange platform. That's the exact same platform that's in use by police department today. The recommendation to utilize Microsoft Exchange actually leverages existing city investments in Microsoft tools. The city standard for office productivity is Microsoft. It's Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint.
And I guess I'm going to stop you here before, because I can see, okay, we've jumped to, let's go Microsoft. So before we go down that road, my question is, so there's no cities that are using Google Mail then?
Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, there are cities that attempted to use Google. There are cities that use Google, but their police department does not. I can point to our colleagues in the city of Los Angeles. In 2009, they awarded an RFP to Google for a cloud email solution for 30,000 employees. They failed to move all employees over. Only 13,000 employees were able to move. The 17,000 employees of the LAPD could not move because of Google not complying with the CJIS regulation. In 2013, just late last year, the city of Los Angeles issued another RFP to replace Google with a CJIS compliant solution. Additionally, another example, the city and county of San Francisco, right in Google's backyard, as Google is in Mountain View. It's headquartered in Mountain View. Also, for the same reason, their 29,000 employees will be moving onto a Microsoft Exchange platform in the cloud because of CJIS regulations.
Is the Microsoft approach, is this a cloud-based approach that you're recommending?
Chairman Gates, yes, it is. It can be cloud. It can be hybrid, which means a piece of it lives in the cloud and a piece of it lives on-prem, but it's seen as one system, or it can be entirely on-prem. The cloud option offers significant advantages because we would always be on the latest software. We would have better disaster recovery and business continuity because our system would be out in the cloud, and we would not have to purchase infrastructure if it's out in the cloud.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to address that.
Okay. So our recommendation is to standardize on the suite of Microsoft Office tools. You can see that we are leveraging existing investments in office productivity, collaboration, SharePoint, which is a Microsoft product, is our collaboration product. Phoenix.gov, the refresh of our website, is built on a Microsoft platform. Desktop operating systems and server operating systems, those standards are also Microsoft. This will give us efficiency and effectiveness, and also leverage our ability to get better volume pricing from Microsoft because we'd be looking at the entire suite of products. This was approved by the IT Governance Committee in February 2014, and the funding was in the city manager's proposed FY 2014-15 budget. Our next steps include a software assessment of all Microsoft products citywide. In fact, I have a meeting with Microsoft tomorrow to kick that off. We'll be determining gaps in required licensing moving forward. The formal project begins in July, and we will start with a review and validation of business requirements. The deployment model will also be determined. I know Councilman Nowakowski has expressed a keen interest, as well as other members of the subcommittee, in cloud-based applications. We'll be certainly looking at a cloud-based implementation as a potential. The formal RFP will be released to acquire licensing and professional services to migrate the Lotus Notes users to Microsoft Exchange, and we anticipate it will take 18 months to fully migrate all 9,500 users from Lotus to the new platform.
Good question on the 18 months from today?
From July 1st.
Okay.
So we anticipate the project will be completed at the end of calendar year 2015.
For those of us who are not in the software business, despite my name, I'm not. Explain to us why the because I hear this and it sounds like it's single source. Why are we doing an RFP if you guys are recommending Microsoft Exchange and that's where the council goes? What are the RFPs for? What, and is it all of it RFP or is it just a portion of it?
Councilman Gates and members of the subcommittee, the difference in the RFP, the pricing will predominantly be around professional services. On average, it costs anywhere from $60 to $200 per mailbox to do a migration. So we'd be looking for the best pricing on the professional services component of this. The pricing of the actual intellectual property is pretty much governed by the manufacturer, Microsoft, and is pretty standardized and also available on state contract.
Okay, so we wouldn't have to do an RFP on that portion?
We probably could buy off of existing state contract vehicles, and we would RFP the professional services portion.
And not to ask a dumb question, but there's no other option other than Google or Microsoft?
Chairman Gates, the two options are Microsoft and Google. They are number one and number two, depending on who you listen to from market share perspective. Lotus is in there with a very, very small market share, and I don't know if we want to go there.
Anybody else?
No, sir.
Email exchange over on Roosevelt.
No,
Yes,
sir.
we want to buy local here.
We
So
wanna
do we
buy
have any?
local, that's right. We're gonna insist
Just
on it,
kidding,
so.
just kidding.
So essentially, that concludes my presentation. I wish to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today.
Other questions from my colleagues, comments? All right, well, thank you very much. So you will be back at what point to
We'll
the,
be-
to
Mr.
approve for
Yes.
subcommittee and then full council
Yes.
approval?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, will be coming forth to you at some point for approval of the professional services contract as we move forward. But
Okay.
that'll be the next time you'll see us on this topic. Unless you'd like to hear an update in between, we'd be happy to
Yeah,
do
no,
so.
I mean, it seems to me, at some point, the council
Yes.
is going to bless the decision to go with Microsoft,
Yes.
right? So when is that process going to move forward?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, great
For
question.
those watching you, we now have Paul Blue playing the role of Ed Zerker.
I'm the less good-looking, shorter person in the city. That's a great question. I'll visit with the Information Technology Department, but I indeed have a note about how we validate the selection with, in terms of the broad policy choice, and I imagine that is something we can bring forward on a formal agenda in the near future.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Very excited about this moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we have and I apologize, I am jumping on top of your meeting. You have a call to the public, so I will stand down. I'm sorry.
We have called to the public, but no cards. Anyone here for call to the public? Okay, great. Then we will move forward to item 8, future agenda items. Mr. Blue?
And so we have a list of items that are here, and you see referenced 4 items for the June agenda related to the performance dashboard, contract renewal with GPEC. We're going to come back for action on open data, and a review by the auditor of their cost recovery fee methodology that I think that was discussed yesterday in some fashion, in some limited fashion at the policy meeting. And we may indeed have 1 or 2 other economic development items, but those are the ones we have of the moment for June.
Okay, great. Vice Mayor, any additional future agenda items?
No, sounds fun.
Okay, great. Well, I had one other. Been reading in the paper and hearing about the strategic plan effort at the county that they just engaged in, and it seems to have been very successful and led into a unanimous vote in favor of the budget. And so I thought it might be interesting if someone from the county would, either at the elected level, county manager, would like to come over and talk to us about that process, how, what went well, what the challenges were, and giving us some guidance as we look at that, because there does appear to be some interest at the council level in this moving forward.
Okay, we'll make it so.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Unless we have anything else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.